Namaskar. Welcome to part 3 of this video. We are watching the interview clip of Nirmala Sitharaman about electoral bonds, about the economy in general and the upcoming elections. And at the end, we mention some things about cryptocurrency as well. I'll give the link to the original video in the description. Go and check it out. Come back and react with me. I'll give my socials in the pinned comment. Do follow me and give me your suggestions on how to improve my videos and also the videos that you want me to react to. Let's start.
Madam Finance Minister, recently we got to know the identity of the donors in the electoral bonds. And as I was scrutinizing the list, there are a couple of questions that I'm sure are in the minds of everyone here. A, the fact that the BJP gets the large majority of the funding, which can be partly explained by the fact that you're the party in power and everybody wants to be with whoever they think can win. But there are two other questions. One, that the country's major corporate groups, and I don't want to name any one or two, but the big funders who you'd imagine are the ones who are spending their money because it's now through white channels, are not on that list. They're not amongst the major donors, and I'm wondering, okay, if those guys are funding, how's that money coming and how are they funding and why is it not through white channels? The second question, Madam Finance Minister, is this, that out of the 30 top funders, 14 corporates had some kind of investigative agency chasing them for some case, which would lead everyone sitting here to wonder whether this is some kind of a buy or sell some protection. If these agencies are chasing you, fund through the electoral bond route in the hope that you can buy yourself some protection. Now, the Modi government's promise was, we will not let this happen. No way, no crony capitalism. And yet the data seems to be telling a story which leads to many questions, Madam Finance Minister.
First of all, I don't know what the implication here is when he mentions crony capitalism. But the crony capitalism in my mind would be like what I have read is that when the capitalists approach the government and they try to enforce certain reforms which will benefit their businesses in exchange of money or the political funding. Now, here in the first part of the question, the allegation is that जो companies थी, they were being chased by EDs. So they gave some contribution to BJP, जिसकी वजह से क्या हुआ कि उनके अगेंस्ट जो केसेस थे वो ड्रॉप कर दिए गए. So that is not crony capitalism. That would be extortion on the BJP's part, on the government's part. कि government is extorting them for money by using the agencies that are there at its disposal. So that wouldn't be crony capitalism. The term crony capitalism would not apply here. But let's see what the discussion says.
I think you've based yourself on huge assumptions. That the money is given after the ED raid happened. For all you know, the money was given earlier. And in spite of that, we went knocking at their doors. Am I making sense? No? What if the companies gave the money and after that we still went and knocked at their doors through ED? Is that a probability or not? That's an assumption which Rahul has made, that ED went and knocked at their doors, they wanted to save themselves and therefore they came up with the funds. One. Second assumption in that itself is, are you sure that they've given it to BJP? They probably gave it to the regional parties. What makes you assume so many things and build a narrative? The government has given and the State Bank has done its job as per the orders given by the Supreme Court. Now you do any hair splitting on it, but do it without assumptions of this nature. ED, and therefore they gave you. But the rest of them didn't. The rest of them have given God knows to who. Which ED?
It is also possible that they gave to the regional parties and then the BJP went after them. So this is also a bundle of assumptions. But why assume? Like if we are assuming, then we can assume anything. So if in the lack of evidence, we can form any theory that we want.
ED was sent to them, and they have also given it. I think smart. Hard.
That is such a Dhruv Rathi thing to do that Rahul Kamal just did, because he just pulled some circumstances and then made a narrative around of it based on what suits him. So that is what is happening.
Working research will do good rather than lazy journalism.
Did she just do what I think she did? Wait, let's go back.
I think, smart, hard-working research will do good rather than lazy journalism.
That was a tight slap. Look at him. He's looking on the other side. And look at Anjana. She's trying to suppress a smile. Well, that was lazy journalism. You don't do any proper research. You don't form conclusion based on the evidence. You just compile a bundle of assumptions based on some circumstances, and then you come up with a theory which suits the question that you're asking. So that is lazy journalism, I would say. The audience just went bonkers.
Finance Minister, a quick follow-up on this. One, do you think loss-making firms and shell companies should be barred from political funding? And the second question that is related to this is that why is there so much doubt about corporate funding? Don't companies and businesses, if we have a right to vote, we also should be having a sort of right to finance elections of our choice?
एक लीडिंग सवाल इससे हिंदी में भी मैं पूछ लेती हूँ, आप एक साथ जवाब दे दीजिएगा कि पूरा कॉन्सेप्ट इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स का ये शक पैदा करता है कि राजनीतिक उगाही यानी पॉलिटिकल एक्सटॉर्शन का एक सिस्टम हो सकता है किसी भी पार्टी के लिए. आई एम नॉट रूलिंग आउट रीजनल पार्टीज और कांग्रेस और बीजेपी, एनीवन. किसी के लिए भी पूरा इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड्स का जो कॉन्सेप्ट ही है वो पॉलिटिकल उगाही के लिए मौका देता है. क्या ये सही नहीं है?
अंजना जी, मैं सिर्फ एक बार विस्तार से ये विषय बोलना चाह रही हूं एंड ऑल्सो एड्रेसिंग योर सिद्धार्थ योर क्वेश्चन. इससे पहले क्या था, मैं फुल्ली कॉन्शियस हूं कि ये मामला कोर्ट में अभी भी चालू है, चल रही है. verdict is come, SBI is got to be submitting, it is submitted.
There's a very subtle nuance to this whole discussion. She addresses everyone by their first name, even though when she doesn't need to. Like she pointed towards Siddharth and said, I'm addressing your question as well. And it was obvious who she was referring to, but yet she took the name because I kind of feel like that they're advised to do that because it establishes that aura of superiority, or that, or not superiority per se, the aura of authority, one would say, around her, and that would lead the viewers to perceive that okay, the questions are tough, but she's still in charge, she is still in command. So I could be wrong, I just nitpick a lot, so I don't know, but it's what I felt like.
मगर विषय इसमें एक प्रश्न मेरे मन में आता है, क्या इससे पहले जो सिस्टम था वो 100% परफेक्ट था क्या? नहीं. And let us just recall what my predecessor, when he brought this electoral bonds, Arun Jaitley ji said, he said, उससे बेहतर है भाई, कम से कम पैसा जो पार्टियों को चलता है वो अकाउंट के द्वारा चलने दो. That is why electoral bonds, monies are going into the accounts, from account to party's account. So कम से कम जो पार्टी तक पहुंचता है पैसा, कोई भी पार्टी क्यों ना हो, वो वाइट पहुंचता है. It's not a perfect system, but you moved from almost a wild law unto oneself kind of a situation where everybody did what they wanted. So we moved from that to this system. This is certainly not perfect, but one bit better. Now, that's not it. Fine. In the wisdom of Supreme Court, they thought this is not the way to go about it. Sorry. All right. इससे बेहतर सिस्टम आने तक अभी क्या हम वापस उसी जमाने पर चले गए हैं कि जो मर्जी कर सकते हैं, कैश में दो, चेक में दो, कुछ में दो, कुछ और में दो, वगैरह. I am not criticizing the Supreme Court's judgment. But it is an analysis which runs in my mind. And I'm sure all of us are thinking about it. So a system which was not perfect, from a system which was completely imperfect, was brought in, consciously brought in, saying at least one aspect of it will be cleaner. Well, it's not approved by the Supreme Court, all right. So therefore, अभी हमारा प्रयत्न ये होना चाहिए, कम से कम इससे बहुत सारे सीखना लायक है कि अभी जो कानून जब भी होगा कि नहीं होगा. आई एम नॉट कमेंटिंग ऑन इट. इट्स नॉट अ headline for Rahul to say finance minister said that the new government there will be. I'm not saying anything. I'm only saying if at all whenever something comes, we'll have to introduce elements of lessons that we've taken from this to make sure there is a transparency. That transparency will have to be progressively better than each earlier system.
Madam Finance Minister, we are coming to the...
And yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Siddharth, you're right. Why not? If corporates can fund, they can fund. But of course, under which scheme of things, which law, all that will have to be worked out. Nobody is saying no parties cannot be funded.
But loss-making and shell companies.
Yes, there are issues on those sort of things, which of course will have to be looked into. You can't afford to have shell companies or, loss-making companies. That's a very valid point.
Madam Finance Minister, we are...
But I don't know exactly how it works, but I assume that when the electoral bonds are purchased from SBI, the SBI would do its due diligence. Like जब हम लोग भी जाते हैं तो वो KYC वगैरह सब एड्रेस प्रूफ वगैरह सब लेते हैं तो I don't know what level of due diligence is done when our electoral bond is purchased from SBI into that company, but I assume that they do something. So that should be done if it's not being done.
We are coming to the close of the first session of the India Today Conclave. And before we end, I have one final question. When we'd spoken to you at the peak of the crypto hype, you'd said you don't believe in the crypto asset, that this is pure speculation. I just want to call this visualization, which goes back a few years, looks at the crash, which is when a lot of people sitting here would have imagined that the crypto story is over, this was speculation, this is like tulips, this was never real. And then voila, the cockroach bounces back. Now, when you look at this chart now, more and more serious traders and firms are looking at crypto as an asset, saying if it survived so many falls, there is some underlying resilience, which even if doesn't make sense simplistically, but obviously is there, which is why it's kind of bounced back. And now, given the fact that crypto supply is also coming down, in the context of how market fundamentals are moving at this moment, is that leading the government also potentially to reassess its position on cryptos?
Well, I just want to add one thing that जब हम ये graph देखते हैं ना तो हम सोचते हैं कि wow, it is a very profit making asset. We should invest our money into it. But the people who are serious investors who invest for long terms and it is their business to invest would not look at this graph and think this is a good investing opportunity, because it is something that can fall very drastically over a very short period of time. And even though it is profit making, but they would not consider it a safe investment. So that also has to be kept in mind, that investors would never advise their clients to invest into something that could just fall halfway overnight.
Reassess its position. Its position has always been this, that assets created in the name of crypto can be assets for trading, assets for speculation, assets for money making, assets for many other things. We hadn't regulated them then, we haven't regulated them even now, but they cannot be currencies is what I've always held, and that's the Government of India position also. Currencies are to be issued with the fiat of the government or the central bank of the day. So that is a different story. So if they're coming back, there's resurgence, that is the asset which is being created for speculation or for trading or for whatever purpose. And it is still unregulated in India. And that is why we thought it fit to raise it in the G20 forum, because as it is so technology driven, and it will have a bearing on cross-border payments and so on, If one country regulates and others don't, it'll be an easy way of moving money, round tripping or funding drugs or even terrorism and so on. So we wanted to create a kind of a framework by taking it to the level of G20. It has been very well received, and I'm sure there will be some framework emerging.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the first session of the India Today Conclave. One of the critiques, frankly, of the state of India's democratic play at this moment is the allegation that ministers in the government don't take tough questions and that journalists don't ask tough questions. I think the first session of the conclave should whip your appetite and give you the sense that Madam Finance Minister didn't have anything about what to ask, what not to ask. Questions that could potentially be asked were asked, and she answered them, throwing a few punches as bravely as was possible. Thank you very much. We appreciate the candor and we appreciate your presence.
Imagine Rahul sitting over there and having to answer all these questions. Of course, Rahul does not have the same level of responsibility as her because he's not in power. But we attended his this Cambridge address or interview, whatever that was, where he was given very soft balls, and still he stumbled and struggled to answer those questions. And when I raised that issue with some of my Congress supporting friends, they said he was emotional. He couldn't answer because he got emotional when the question about violence was asked, because then he remembered his father being assassinated. Now, this is not true, because anyone who has seen that interview in its entirety would know that the Congress supporters started clapping because Rahul did not answer anything. Okay, so Rahul said, what are you doing? Don't clap because I'm going to answer. And he was smiling at that point. And then the journalist said, I didn't mean to stump you. So the environment at that point was that Rahul did stumble, did get stumped because of that question. And the question was very softball. It was something to do with how do you see the rising violence in your country and how do you reconcile with that, all of that. So I got sidetracked a little bit. We discussed a lot of interesting issues, which was a blend of economics and politics, and also the whole election process. Now, one thing that I have discussed most of the things that came to my mind right at that point, because it's not easy to remember everything throughout the video and then discuss it at the end. But one thing that I remember is that Anjana raised this question. कि मोदी जी ने तो कमिटमेंट कर दिया कि हम इतने ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी बनाएंगे, बट उसका जो भार है वो आपके कंधों पे लाद दिया है, because it is your responsibility to fulfill that promise. So now, when we think about finance ministry and we think about Nirmala Sitharaman and that she is responsible, it is not entirely true, right? Because most of the decisions that are made in a budget do affect the upcoming elections, or like the perception of the government in general. So this finance ministry portfolio is not something like, let's say, highway portfolio, or let's say animal husbandry or minority affairs or something like that, because people are not keeping as close watch on it. So those ministers are given a free rein to do how they want to do and do whatever they want to do. Like nobody's questioning Nitin Gadkari ki itne highways kyun bana rahe ho, ruk jao thoda sa. No, nobody's doing that. But when it comes to finance ministry, then the top leadership also has a hand to play. Like she's one of the top leadership, but I'm talking about the PMO, or like Prime Minister and Home Minister himself. So they will also have a say in the finance decisions. So when she said कि ये सिर्फ आपकी responsibility, it is not entirely true. It is, even if in her critical thinking, in her critical analysis of the whole situation, she would make certain decisions that will let's say impact the voter count in the short term, the topmost leadership would intervene and say कि नहीं ऐसा नहीं कर सकते. So if something goes wrong, then she alone is not to be blamed, is what I want to say. Anyway, very interesting video, very interesting discussions. If you think she did not answer about something properly or evaded the question somehow, then do mention in the comments and we can have a discussion about it. Thank you. I'll see you guys in the next one.